I certainly don't like playing shutdown politics.
And how damaging would that be for Republicans ahead of the November races?
I don't think it'd be helpful, so let's try and avoid it.
Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson, he's one of many Republicans who are concerned about a possible government shutdown. Now, he's responding to this tweet sent by our president. I would be willing to shut down government if the Democrats don't give us the votes for border security, which includes the wall, must get rid of lottery, catch and release, etc., and finally go to system of immigration based on merit. We need great people coming into our country, end quote. Trump tweeted that out soon after he met with Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan. At that meeting, the two top Republicans in Congress urged Trump to avoid a shutdown, especially so close to the midterms. Trump, frankly, not afraid to throw those guys under the bus. We've seen this now for about 2 years. It also seems like General John Kelly, he's in a similar spot. Politico, they've got a piece running right now saying he's chief of staff in name only. Here's part of that, quote, many of Trump's friends and advisors have concluded the president doesn't really want a chief of staff, and he had several confidants urging him to operate without one. But for this president, keeping Kelly around offers him the best of both worlds. Somebody to blame when things go awry, but nobody fettering his freedom of action. Here to talk about all that and more, ABC News political director Rick Klein. Rick, a lot to unpack after a busy tweeting weekend. Let's first start with the shutdown. Is this just fire and brimstone, or could the president really follow through in this threat as we're just months from the midterms?
Well, Republicans hope it's an idle threat because the last thing that they want to do with only 99 days now left before the midterms is to worry about another showdown in the fall. They thought they had an agreement to not worry about a shutdown until after the midterm elections. The president, though, saying he wants that border wall. So a lot of them are split. A lot of Republicans feel like a fight over border wall funding and immigration is something that benefits them. Then again, flirting with disaster of a shutdown, that was a very bad idea for most Republicans. They do not want to be trying to make the argument that they should stay in charge, at the same time not even demonstrating that they know how to keep the lights on.
I saw Rudy Giuliani on earlier on CNN, and I had a little bit of whiplash trying to figure out if everything I've been hearing these past few months comports at all with what I heard him now say, which is in effect not that there was no collusion, but if there is collusion, it doesn't matter with respect to Trump and Russia. What's the reaction on Capitol Hill to this, changing of the goalposts seemingly by the week?
Yeah, I haven't heard from the Hill yet. The House is out of session for the rest of the summer. But yet you're right that this substantially changes the argument that they've been making for some time. And to just say that collusion isn't a crime at all, so what's the big deal? That is a much different argument. And we're used to the shifting explanations. We're used to the backtracks. We're used to misleading statements from the president, from his attorneys. But you're right that Rudy Giuliani seems to be doing a bit more of that as Mueller's attention gets closer and closer. And as tomorrow begins the first Mueller-inspired trial of Paul Manafort, the former campaign manager for President Trump.
The attacks by the president on Bob Mueller became pretty personal, more than they had been until this recent tweet storm. Is there a rhyme or reason to this? Obviously, he wants to discredit the investigation. We've heard witch hunt for a long time. But to go where he went and, for whatever it's worth, not supported by any facts, I got to imagine that took a few people, even this administration, off guard.
Yeah, he's been after this for a while, and I think it is about shaping public perceptions, working the refs and the refs of the American people. You're trying to get people to prejudge the outcomes of an investigation when Bob Mueller holds the cards. We don't know where he's going to put this out, how he's going to, when it's going to, how he's going to decide to share with the public his findings. Are there going to be more indictments? Will there be a big report? We don't know any of that. So the attention of the president and of a lot of his political allies has been to try to shape the perceptions for people to think Bob Mueller equals bad going in. And if the president can rally his troops behind him on that, then they at least get a way toward establishing public opinion around a report that's still to be released.
Whether it be the lack of message discipline or this being an intentional play, one of the people that we thought would help to kind of keep things more in message was General Kelly. It now looks like the chief of staff has 2 feet on a banana peel, and then it might be when, not if, he's pushed out. Is that more because the president doesn't really think he needs a chief of staff and people just say go with whatever your instincts are, or that he just no longer wants to listen to basically the general here trying to keep him on message and trying to keep some of the messengers out of his ear?
It's both of that, and I also think General Kelly has decided that he can't put himself in the middle of the chaos all the time, so he has taken a step back and isn't as much inserting him into the decision-making process. One person close to the White House told me that he's really just the chief of staff in name only. He's surviving by just staying on the outside because the president doesn't seem to want a chief of staff, doesn't allow himself to be controlled. It's been a long and unusual tenure for Chief of Staff Kelly. Not a lot of people think he's going to be in the job much longer, but it may just be that the president doesn't want to change because the status quo for him works, which is to say to have a chief that really isn't empowered to do very much.
You know, in terms of the cabinet and the undersecretaries, we've seen a cast of characters here, and that's putting it politely. But the idea of the person being tabbed to basically run the Superfund, even by this standards, is unbelievable. I mean, the guy's name was the dioxin lawyer when he was at Dow, and now he's nominated to be the assistant administrator at the EPA, overlooking, as I said, the Superfund. My point is there any line where Congress says, wait a second, this is, you can't have, I'll make this a drug addict run the DEA, the idea that this person's job to look out for the environment, and he's the one doing the toxic dumping, or at least was involved in it tangentially, let's be polite. It's crazy, right, Rick?
Well, I think this administration has pushed the envelope time and again in terms of putting insiders in, and swampiness has become a feature of this administration. I think you did see it with the EPA administrator Scott Pruitt. Ultimately, there was too much of a mass of stench around him for him to stay on. But we have seen this White House, this administration, continue to push things in terms of putting insiders, people with a lot of political connections, a lot of dirty potential dealings into positions of power.
Finally, Rick, with Washington quiet this week, tell people what they ought to look for maybe a developing story.
Well, the big thing to me is now the midterms. We're only 99 days out now, Richard, and really you're seeing it play against two different backdrops. And the House members went home for this week knowing that they need to change the narrative. For Republicans, need to change the messaging and the narrative. The president's going to be out campaigning quite a bit in the coming days, and what kind of places he goes, how he decides to frame that, I feel like a lot is going to get won or lost in this month, where once you get past Labor Day, it's going to be hard to change the perceptions of this race.
Rick Klein, as always, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard.
All right, everybody, when we come back, Election Day, believe it or not, under 100 days here, we're going to take a look at where the numbers are. Also check in on whether or not that blue wave is forming or if it's ebbing back. Stay with us.